Okay, happy World Microbiome Day. For the day that's in it, you always have these eureka moments, or I certainly think I do, around putting pieces of jigsaws together. And because it's World Microbiome Day, and I've been working with microbes very closely for the last 2.5 years, I've learned lots of things that are really interesting. And not just on a specific, I suppose, animal-based level, I've learned lots there as well, but looking at the whole system, our ecosystems, from all the way from soils to animals to humans ourselves, and how interlinked we are. And with all the discussions around sustainability and food and health and humans, animal health, and looking at planetary soil health and biodiversity, there's some interlinked nature between all these things, and it happens to be microbes. And I want to explain in this video. So when we talk about microbes, microbes are tiny organisms like viruses, bacteria, protozoa and fungi. They're everywhere. They're in their trillions. They're in different areas. We have different microbiota, like on our skin and our digestive tract. But if we start understanding their role and their function, well, if we look at a collection of microorganisms in a specific area, is termed a microbiome. So there's a lot of talk about the gut microbiome. And it's recognized that this plethora of trillions of microorganisms work together collectively, have a symbiotic relationship with ourselves, in our animals, in our digestive tract, really looking at, I suppose, their functionality, that they're almost like an organ itself. And I think been recognized now in human animal medicine that, the gut microbiome is so important, it's like another organ. But microbiomes are everywhere, so biomes are everywhere, and I'd like to start in soil because it is a really interesting area with all the talk about sustainability, our ecosystems and climate change. When we understand actually plants, if we look at how plants work, we'll talk about the plant biome in a minute, but plants exude 25% of their energy through the root, feeding microorganisms in soil. And we have viruses, we have bacteria, we have protozoa, we have fungi in this ecosystem, particularly on the rhizophere and root of the plant. They're involved in nutrition, they're involved in immunity and protection for the plant, and they're also involved in the digestion and absorption of nutrients into the plant. Now, there's a huge number of factors that influence this. It can be influenced by root length, depth, and that's why we talk about cover crops and keeping roots in soil for longer, zero till. All those type of ideas are coming from the fact that, well, we know that the plant himself has a synergistic relationship through its root with the soil microbiome. And I think if we understand some of the challenges of the day within the ecosystem, everyone's talking about carbon emissions. Well, if we look at carbon sequestration through the plant, through photosynthesis, and understanding the understanding microbes and their role, and a healthy soil microbiome being able to build carbon, water retention, drought resistance, well, then we really need to be starting with soil health and understanding the microorganisms. We've used chemicals to grow plants, but if we understand the biological relationships between plants, soils and animals, it's a much healthier future. Controversial. But it is true. It's really fascinating. Another thing people always talk about is biodiversity loss. If we look at biodiversity, I suppose, like a pyramid, okay? And we look at some of the species we talk about, becoming extinct, etc. But if you actually start down through that pyramid is based on microorganisms. So every organism above that, as they get bigger, feed on microorganisms. So if we fail with if we have a poor soil microbiome, well, it's going to impact everything above ground. So that's really the pyramid of biodiversity that starts with soil health. So the soil microbiome is involved in nutrition, immunity of the plant, protection, and so really soil microbiome is kind of the foundation. And for me, as I learn more about it, there's lots I don't know, obviously, but the more I learn about it, well, this is really important. And then I think about, from me as somebody who's been involved in grazing, ruminants and livestock, looking at their synergistic relationship, particularly in soil health through the production of microorganisms in their feces and dung, and that nutrient recycling that's absolutely key to plant health. We look at trees and carbon sequestration, but actually plant material growing has more ability to sequester carbon and build soil, actually. So it's really interesting. If we move then and we look at our grazing livestock, we look at our ruminants, our cows and sheep, well, they're actually like microbial factories. We're often not feeding the animals, we're feeding the microbes in the rumen, which are involved in breaking down plant material and digesting it into energy and protein that's turned into nutritious food for humans. Again, if we look at our horses as a herbivore, they've developed a hind gut, which 66% of their energy comes from through the breakdown of plant materials by microbes. So in our grazing livestock and our herbivores, it's key. Even in our intensive livestock systems, we can look at biomes and look at how we can harness microbiomes like water, feed, the environment to actually improve health biologically. Oceans, this is very poor fish, but if we look at our ocean microbiome, another vast area of research. So where this gets interesting in this ecosystem is if we look towards human health and the human gut microbiome. One thing when you read about human health in developed countries, what we're seeing is we're seeing a decline in infectious diseases over the last 50 to 80 years, but we're seeing a massive increase in chronic disease. We're also seeing a shifting of, in developed countries, the gut microbiomes. Through metagenomics, we can now measure this at large scale. We're seeing a shifting of the beneficial microorganisms to a narrower range. So one thing you'll always hear when we talk about microbiomes is the diversity piece. So diversity is a really important thing when we look at either microbiomes in any, whether it be soil, animals, plants or humans. So when we look at chronic disease increases, there's a huge focus then, this is not an alien, it's a human, there's a huge focus then on the gut microbiome, because again, it's involved in our cells and digestion, immunity and protection. Same with animals. So if we break that down, so a healthy gut microbiome is involved in digestion, but immunity, 70% of your immunity is gut-based. Why? There's all these white blood cells in our digestive tract because of the surface area. So the surface area of our gut is like a tennis court. If you put out an adult human, it's a huge surface area. All the white blood cells are there to provide protection in our lymph and other parts of our immune system. But microbes actually are communicating with our immune cells. They're key to immunity. And one really important thing we look at when we look at nature and development and biological evolution is actually microbes provide protection against harmful substances and protect against harmful pathogens. They do it in soil, they do it in animals, they do it in ourselves. So the gut microbiome has these three core functions. If we look at, well, what's impacting microbial health in humans? Well, diet, stress, environment and chemicals are often the main ones we look at. Particularly when we look at our diet, a lot of conversations about what the optimum diet is, but processed foods in particular is huge. If we look at stress, it's how we live our lives. The environment we live in is changing all the time. We've less exposure to microorganisms. Even if we look at our pets, their gut microbiome is important, but there's a real synergistic relationship between having a pet and having a more diverse and healthy gut microbiome. So it's a positive benefit. And then if you look at the various chemicals we've used, maybe in agriculture, in our environments, that what impact are they having? Like antibiotics, for example, a fantastic tool for medicine, but they have some side effects. So it's about understanding these ecosystems and recognizing that we're seeing an increase in chronic disease and asking the question, why? Again, not everything is related to microbes and microbiome. There's lots of factors here. But for me, it's a real eureka moment when you start putting all the pieces of the jigsaw together, understanding that, gut health and brain health are connected. All of us have had that butterflies in our stomach, that gut feeling. We now know the brain and the gut are connected. And animals are no different. So I've been involved in research looking at gut health and behavior. It's just a fascinating area. So is there a link between all this? Well, I think if we look at animals, we also see where the diet is wrong. So if we look at grazing animals where there's an issue with diet, it can have an impact on gut health and performance. We're always trying to reduce stress. We're looking at the environment we're raising animals in and looking at chemicals. So there's so many commonalities from humans to animals to the plant kingdom to the soil microbiome. So I think for me, I don't have all the answers, but it's the interconnected relationship between our ecosystems. And if we begin to understand that, and we are understanding it now because of a thing called metabolomics. We now understand how things work, how things are interconnected. Lots of questions we don't have. But if we can start understanding nature, understanding the biological processes, well then we can improve soil health, we can improve plant diversity and plant health through biological solutions. It's going to have a positive benefit for our grazing animals and even our herbivores like horses. We can understand how we can harness biology around the biomes of intensive farming. We can look at our oceans, but we can also link it back to ourselves. Now there's lots of debate about the perfect diet, but when we look at whole foods and we look at animal proteins and animal fats coming from a system where we're really looking at soil health, grazing and biomes, well, it has to have a positive benefit. And even if we want to eat all plant foods, we've got to respect the fact that in our ecosystems, when we look at soil health, grazing animals in particular play a huge role, and even intensive livestock, the nutrients that come from that type of farming can play back into soil health. And there's always compromises in an ecosystem around nutritional value and quality, bioavailability of nutrients. But to me, the eureka moment is that one thing that's common is if we ignore our microbiomes, and World Microbiome Day, if we ignore the benefits of having a healthy, diverse soil microbiome, understanding in animals the role of the different biomes, particularly the gut biomes, and ourselves, then we're going to be in trouble. But also on the flip side of that, on World Microbiome Day, there's a huge opportunity to really understand this ecosystem for better plant, soil, animal, human, and planetary health. That's World Microbiome Video Day.